Hello and welcome to week 4 of the course. So last week we started looking at experiments, and in particular we looked at the language of experimentation and how an experiment needs to be set up so that we can make proper inference from that experiment. And we also looked at the things that can go wrong in an experiment, and when that happens there might be a lurking variable. And so in other words, it looked like two things, maybe something was going on between them, but because of that lurking variable we couldn't make that conclusion. But proper experimentation helps us eliminate that possibility of lurking variables or confounding variables. Today we're going to continue this idea of looking at data, and we're going to look at data visually now, and we're going to talk about what inference we can make from data just by looking at it visually, and then also how that changes once we know that that data comes from an experiment. And so as an example of this, recall that example we had last week where we said, hey, it's reasonable to say that as ice cream sales increase, so do shark attacks. And we said, well, does that mean that increased sales of ice cream causes shark attacks? And as you found out, the answer there is no, and that's because there's a confounding variable, and that confounding variable is weather. So we're going to kind of look at it from a different aspect this week. And so again, let's think about those ice cream sales and shark attacks. So instead of just talking about ice cream sales and shark attacks, one thing we could do is make a plot of the data. So I've made this data up, but it would be reasonable to think that if we're looking at ice cream sales and we have shark attacks, if we look at a scatter plot, it would appear that as ice cream sales increase, so do shark attacks. And so these are going to be the kind of plots that we look at this week. And so the question is, just because we see a plot that looks like this, does this mean that the ice cream sales are influencing or causing the increased shark attacks? And you already know from last week that the answer to that is no, and that's because there's a lurking variable. And so one of the primary ideas this week is going to be this idea that sometimes we can look at plots and it will look like something's happening, and we call that something an association or a correlation. But that doesn't necessarily mean that one thing is causing the other one. And actually, in order to show that causation, we do have to have that good experiments, those good set of experiments. So you're going to see lots of examples this week where you're going to look at plots and it's going to look like something's happening. In other words, there's an association or there's correlation. But that doesn't necessarily imply that there is a causation. It doesn't necessarily mean that one thing is making the other one happen. And that's because there's likely some kind of lurking or confounding variable present, and that's because the data did not come from a good experiment. And so again, you're going to see lots of examples of this week. So what I would like you to do is, after this video, go ahead and complete all of the work for today, and then there's a second video that's posted below this one. So again, what I want you to do is go and complete all of the work, and then I want you to come back to this section of the course, and there's going to be a video clip from CNN below this one, and I'd like you to watch that video. That video is actually from the one of the recent Republican debates, and they actually use this idea of correlation and causation in there, but unfortunately they use it incorrectly. So I want you to watch that video after you do all of today's work, and then come back and watch the second part of the weekly video. And I'm going to talk about what happened in the Republican debate and how these ideas are really hard and they get confused a lot. And so I'm going to talk about that. But I think to really understand, that discussion, you need to do all of today's work first. So again, do all of today's work, then go back, watch the Republican debate video, which is posted below this one, and then watch the second part of this weekly video. And otherwise, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I will be around. And one thing that is in the syllabus, but I haven't necessarily talked about, is if at any point, if you all want office hours, I am more than happy to meet via Skype, or I'm usually in my office on UK's campus. You're welcome to set up an appointment with me and come into the office and talk to me about the work as well. So, if you feel like, if you feel like one-on-one help would help more, please feel free to ask, and I'm more than happy to provide that.